Everyone at that table thought Mason Wells had failed. 31 years old, and still no job title anyone could explain at a dinner party. An old gray Corolla, parked 2 blocks away, so nobody would see it pull up first. A habit by now, more than a decision. His mother had stopped bringing him up at family dinners. She'd talk about her sister's kids instead. Their promotions, their new houses, their new babies. She'd skip right over him. Like his name was a chair nobody wanted to sit in anymore. His father would just clear his throat and pass the gravy, the way he did with anything he didn't know how to fix. His cousins had stopped asking what he was doing with his life, too. They'd ask everyone else at that table. His cousin Angela, who'd just made assistant manager somewhere, got asked about it twice. Nobody asked him. Somebody always changed the subject before it got anywhere near him. It wasn't malice, not really. It was just easier that way, for everybody, including him. Nobody at that table knew about the storage unit off Route 9. Nobody knew about the notebook he filled almost every night at a gas station counter, under a light that flickered every few seconds, like it was thinking about giving up too. They thought he'd given up. He hadn't given up on a single thing. He'd just stopped explaining himself, because the explaining never worked. Because the truth, if he'd said it out loud back then, would have sounded like a lie anyway. So he let them believe what was easier to believe. He passed the mashed potatoes. He said, "I'm doing okay," when his aunt asked, and he let it die right there. Under the table, his phone buzzed once. A notification from an account nobody in that house had ever seen the name of. He didn't check it. Not at this table. He'd learned that a long time ago. Some things you don't explain. You just carry them, quietly. And that silence, sitting there at his mother's table, passing the potatoes, saying nothing. That silence was the entire plan. Mason worked nights at a gas station off the county road. $11 an hour, fluorescent lights. The same 4 customers after midnight, buying the same things they always bought. To everyone who knew him, that was the whole story. A grown man ringing up gas station coffee at 2 in the morning, going nowhere fast. Nobody bats an eye at a guy behind a counter. That's the thing about that job. It makes you invisible in exactly the way he needed to be. Regulars would ask him the same question every few weeks, in that same careful tone. "You still doing this?" He'd just nod and hand back their change. During the day, while most people were clocked in somewhere, Mason was somewhere else entirely. A basement, a cracked concrete floor, 3 machines humming low against the wall, like they had somewhere to be. He kept a notebook in his jacket pocket, the kind with a rubber band wrapped around it so the pages wouldn't fall open on their own. Numbers, dates, a running total, not a diary. Nobody writes numbers like that in a diary. His old college roommate ran into him once, mid-shift, and texted the group chat right after. Saw Mason. Kind of rough, not gonna lie. Nobody responded. Nobody needed to. The story had already been decided. Mason never heard about it. Wouldn't have corrected it if he had. He wasn't saving face. He'd stopped caring about face a long while back. And this part matters, so don't miss it. None of this was ever about proving anybody wrong. It never was. If it had been, he would have told them the second the numbers looked good. He would have needed them to know. He didn't need that. Not anymore. What he needed was quiet. Room to work without questions he wasn't ready to answer. The facade wasn't really a lie. It was just an unfinished sentence, and he wasn't in any hurry to finish it for anyone but himself. 7 years earlier, Mason was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with a broken laundry room nobody wanted to deal with. 3 washing machines, all 3 down. The landlord kept saying, "Next month," until next month stopped meaning anything at all. Mason fixed the first one himself, off a video he watched twice, standing in that basement with a wrench borrowed from the guy upstairs. It worked. Water ran. The drums spun. He'd actually done it. He remembers that sound better than he remembers most of that whole year. Water finally moving through a pipe that had sat dry for weeks. Word got around the building fast. People started leaving quarters on top of the machine, even though nobody had asked them to. That's a strange kind of moment. A broken machine fixed for free, turning into $40 in loose change by Tuesday. Not a business. Not yet. Just quarters on a machine. But Mason noticed something most people walk right past. A broken thing that everyone needs and nobody wants to deal with. Nobody dresses that up as opportunity. It doesn't look like one. He asked the landlord if he could just buy the other two machines outright, cheap, since they weren't worth fixing to the landlord anyway. The landlord said, "Sure, take them," and probably forgot the whole thing within the week. Mason didn't tell his roommate, didn't tell his mother, didn't tell a single person. Not because it was some big secret yet, because it didn't feel like anything worth explaining. 3 old machines in a basement, but he kept the receipts. He kept a running count in a spiral notebook, the same kind he'd carry for years after that. He'd sit on an overturned bucket some nights, just listening to them run, doing the math in his head long before he ever wrote it down. He didn't know yet what this was going to become. He just knew it was his, and nobody else needed to understand it for it to be real. Every month, on the same day, Mason moved a fixed amount out of his gas station paycheck into an account he didn't touch for anything else. $400, sometimes a little more. It wasn't a lot of money. It wasn't supposed to be a lot of money. It just had to show up every month without fail. He turned down things other people his age never thought twice about. A friend's weekend trip. A new phone when his screen cracked. He just used it cracked for a year. He ate the same 3 meals on rotation, not because he loved them, but because he already knew the exact cost of each one. Make no mistake. It wasn't fun. Scraping by on purpose isn't fun for anybody. But there's a difference between broke and choosing where the money goes. And Mason knew, every single day, which one he actually was. He used that saved-up money to buy more machines. Then he used delivery van, cash, no loan, paint peeling off one door he never got around to fixing. Then a route. 4 apartment buildings, each with a few machines. Each one paying out in quarters and small transfers nobody was watching except him. Here's where it gets bigger than anyone at that dinner table would have ever guessed. By the 3rd year, the route wasn't small anymore. It wasn't headline news either. Nobody photographs a laundry route. But the number sitting in that account, the one nobody in his family had ever heard the name of, carried a lot more zeros than gas station employee would ever suggest to anybody. He didn't tell them. Not the number. Not any of it. Some nights he'd sit in his car outside his mother's house, notebook on the passenger seat, and think seriously about walking in and just saying it. He never did. Because once you say a number like that out loud, you can't unsay it. And he wasn't ready yet for whatever came after saying it. Not yet. By year 5, Mason wasn't fixing machines with a borrowed wrench anymore. He had a system now. Boring, on purpose. 6 buildings, a route mapped out by day of the week. A guy he paid in cash to help with pickups when he couldn't be in 2 places at once. Nothing about it looked impressive from the outside. Just a man in a hoodie, driving a van, hauling quarters and receipts through the same 6 parking lots. That's the whole trick of a business like this. It doesn't dress up as wealth. It dresses up as errands, as nothing much at all. Cash flow doesn't announce itself. It just shows up, month after month, whether anybody's watching or not. There was a cost to all of it, though. A real one. Mason missed his cousin's engagement party because a machine flooded a basement in Building 3, and he had to be there at 11 at night with a shop vac, alone. Nobody at that party knew why he wasn't there. They just added it to the list. Another thing Mason couldn't be bothered to show up for. He drove home from that basement at 2 in the morning, soaked to the knees, and sat in the driveway for a long minute before he could bring himself to go inside. Not because he regretted it, because some nights the math works out just fine and the loneliness gets you anyway. Nobody warns you about that part, that the boring system works, the money comes in steady, and you can still feel like you're disappearing from your own family a little more with every year that passes. There's no line item in a spreadsheet for that. No column for what it actually costs to keep something this quiet for this long. He didn't call anyone that night to explain where he'd been. He just wrote the number down, closed the notebook, and went to bed. 2 more years passed like that. Machines, roots, a notebook filling up with pages nobody else would ever read. The family stopped inviting him to things that mattered, not out of cruelty, just out of habit. You stop setting a plate for someone who never shows up to eat it. Even his one close friend from high school drifted off eventually, tired of hearing, "Can't tonight," working one too many times. His mother called sometimes, not often. One night she called while he was doing inventory in the storage unit off Route 9, surrounded by spare parts and a space heater that barely worked. "Are you okay?" she asked, not curious, careful, the way you ask someone you've already quietly decided is struggling. "I'm fine," Mason said. That was the whole conversation. 2 sentences and a silence neither one of them knew how to fill. He sat down on an overturned bucket after that call and didn't move for a while, because being fine and being believed are 2 completely different things. And he hadn't had the second one in a long, long time. There were nights he wondered if any of it had been worth it, if the account balance even meant anything, if nobody who mattered to him actually knew it existed. He'd catch himself doing the math twice, 3 times, like a bigger number might finally make the quiet feel different. It never did. Money sitting quiet in an account doesn't comfort you at 11 o'clock at night in an empty storage unit. Not by itself, anyway. He thought about quitting the secrecy more than once, just showing up at his mother's door and laying it all out on the table. But every time, something stopped him. Pride, maybe, or fear that the number wouldn't fix what the silence had already cost them both. So why did it still feel like losing, even with everything he'd actually built? He didn't have an answer for that. Not yet. He just closed up the storage unit, locked it, and drove home in the dark. It wasn't Mason who finally broke the silence. It was a piece of mail. He'd registered his small business years earlier, quietly, using his parents' address because he didn't have a permanent one yet. And honestly, never got around to changing it. A property tax notice showed up at his mother's house. Real numbers, printed plainly, tied to a name she recognized. His. She almost threw it out as a mistake. Just another piece of junk mail addressed wrong. Then she opened it. 6 buildings worth of equipment. A business valuation line near the bottom that made her sit down at her own kitchen table and read it twice. She called him, and for once, her voice wasn't careful at all. It was just confused. "Mason, what is this?" He didn't lie. He didn't downplay it either. He drove over that same night and set the notebook down on the table between them. 7 years of numbers. Every machine, every building. Every single quarter that started this whole thing in a basement nobody wanted to fix. It's all there. Total business value, sitting just under $2 million. Monthly cash flow around $7,000. Most months. Quiet and steady, the way it had always been. His mother didn't say much at first. She just kept turning pages, one after another, like she was searching for the part where it stopped being true. "You let us think," she started, and never finished the sentence. "I know," Mason said. "I let you think it." Not because he wanted them to worry. Because the truth, told too early, gets picked apart before it's finished, growing into what it's supposed to be. His father came in halfway through, saw the notebook, and just stood there in the doorway for a while, saying nothing at all. He hadn't been hiding a failure. He'd been protecting something small until it was strong enough to survive being seen. That night, for the first time in years, somebody at that table finally understood exactly what the silence had been for. You'd think that was the end of it. The reveal, the relief, everyone finally seeing him clearly. It wasn't. Not completely. Mason still flinches, just a little, when someone asks what he does for a living. Old habits don't leave just because the reason for them did. He still parks that same gray Corolla a block early sometimes, out of muscle memory more than anything else. His family looks at him differently now, warmer, a a little guilty, maybe, though nobody said that word out loud yet. His mother still asks how he's doing. But it sounds different now, less like a question, more like she actually wants to know the answer. But the years they weren't watching don't just disappear because a notebook finally got read. Mason still remembers the basement, the shop vac at midnight, his mother's careful voice on the phone, asking if he was okay. Money didn't undo any of that. It just gave the silence somewhere to land, finally. He still works some nights at the gas station, actually. Not because he needs to anymore, because it's quiet there. And quiet is still the thing he trusts the most. If you asked him now whether it was worth it, the years, the missed party, the empty storage unit at 11 at night, he wouldn't give you a clean answer. He'd probably just shrug and say building something nobody can see costs more than the number in the account will ever show you. That's not a lesson with a bow on it. It's just true. Somewhere off Route 9, there's still a storage unit with his name on the lease. He could close it now. He's got no real reason left to keep it. But some things you hold on to anyway, because they remind you where you actually started. And some nights, Mason drives out there for no real reason at all, just to sit, just to remember what quiet used to cost him, and what, in the end, it bought.